and welcome. Today, I have a hot topic for you: embracing your inner fire at work. I'm excited to be in this conversation. If you are here with us live, go ahead and write here in the chat so I know that someone is out there listening and that you can hear me. As a woman leader, you may have learned to tuck away your fire. What do I mean by that? To hold something back. We'll talk about this more. The thing is, as Brené Brown says in her landmark TED Talk on vulnerability, you cannot selectively numb. So when you sell out on your inner fire, you also end up losing access to other things that you might truly need along the way to be successful, including your passion, your creativity, your charisma, your joy. There's a lot to do with our inner fire that actually makes a huge difference at work. And, however, if you are a leader who has considerations about bringing your real fire, energy, passion, or emotions to the workplace, you're probably not wrong, because there can also be some sincere challenges or ways that it could get in your way. So, this is a complicated and interesting topic that I love to speak about all day. If you are here for that, you are in the right place. Welcome, Esperanza. I see you're here live. It's so good to see you. Really happy that you're here. If anyone else is out there, just give us a quick hello. You are in the right place if this topic interests you, and also you are not alone. The truth is, not all of our workplace cultures will easily embrace these parts of ourselves, but the rest of the truth is, the more we master and own our relationships with our inner fire, and other emotions as well, the more we learn how to use it skillfully, the more likely people in our workplace will be able to embrace it as well. And the payoff to that can actually be huge. So please stick around if you came for this topic. It is definitely worth talking about. Today in our session, we're going to explore, one, the value of our inner fire, both in business and in life. We're also going to take a look at the realistic dark side of our fire, including how it can be a gateway to burnout, among other things. This is, again, a session on embracing our inner fire. If you are coming in today and you don't know me yet, a couple words about myself. I'm LeeAnn Mallorie. I'm the founder and CEO of Guts and Grace Leadership, where we help women leaders who struggle with challenges like burnout, invisibility, or disconnection from a deeper sense of purpose become more resilient and recognized industry leaders. We do this via a unique methodology that focuses on mindset, intuition, and embodied wisdom, which frankly underscores everything you do as a woman at work. You can learn more about our approach in our masterclass. I will go ahead and put the link in the chat and share it with you here in case you'd like to go deeper in this work. So you can learn more about this methodology, how we work with women leaders in our masterclass. But in short, I'm inviting you to step into a new paradigm of leadership that may turn some of what you think it means to be a good leader on its head, I hope in a good way. So this is my particular flavor of disruption in the leadership conversation. Really listening to our bodies and our wisdom and our intuitions as women in the workplace can make an immense difference to who we're being. And I dare you to stick around and learn more about how we do this. Again, if this sounds intriguing, you're in the right place. Let us go ahead and dive in so we can talk a bit more about fire. First of all, what do I mean by fire? You can really interpret this in any way that you like. It's why I've chosen a word like fire. For some people, when they hear this, they might think my anger, my aggression, my frustration. Awesome, you're in the right place. You might hear passion, excitement, my joy, for example. All of that also could count. However you relate to this word, truly, if you came here, this is what we're going to be talking about today. And one question that I wanted to start with is, why is this topic so hot? It's interesting. I sent this email with a blog out on this topic about a couple of days ago, and I had more response than almost anything I've sent out lately. And I thought, that's so interesting, like what actually people lean into or what people want to go deeper in. I think what's interesting about being a woman in the workplace is that it is not untrue that sometimes we do get judged by, or maybe even in some careers or in some workplaces, we may get put in a box, or we may get assessed, or we may or may not get a promotion as a result of how people are receiving what we might call our fire, for better or for worse, right? Whether we're talking about a good kind of fire or what we assess as a less good kind of fire, this is a really it's tense, because if it's something that you relate to, if you feel like you run fire, or you have fire, or you're missing your fire, or you've lost your fire, You may have a mixed relationship with it. It might have upsides from your perspective, and it may also have gotten you in trouble, or it may have certain kinds of downsides. Certainly 100% true. That doesn't mean that it doesn't quote unquote belong in the workplace, but the question then starts to become how? How do I embrace it? How do I run it? What does that look like? How can that be done in a healthy way that actually has the potential to move your career forward as opposed to hold you back? And this doesn't actually matter. You may be in this question. If you're on the side of the spectrum where you feel like I just completely shut down my fire, or I lost my fire, or I don't know if I have fire, or you could be in this question because you feel like you have too much of it and it's burning everything down and you're not sure what to actually do with it. So, wherever you're at on the spectrum, the same questions might actually be relevant to you. I really like to talk about this because I happen to believe that no matter what it is that we carry, I personally believe, and I've seen this again and again. I've been coaching women leaders for almost 20 years. I personally believe that there's nothing that we have that isn't there for a reason. And I think our fire actually is a really great example of that. So if it is part of you in some way, if we're talking about what would it look like to get you to an executive level in your leadership, what would the biggest possible impact that you could make? I don't believe that that's designed and baked into you, but shouldn't be used. And so then I really do have the question, well, tell me more about it. What's it like? How does it work? How's it not getting used well? How's it getting misused? How's it gotten put away or shut down? Because if it is there, it's probably meant for something. Already, if you leave the live now and you just go and have a reflection on, well, what might be so about that? If this is in me, how could it be there for a reason? Or what do I think it's for? I think you're already going to open an interesting door. So that could be one takeaway from this conversation. I really invite you to actually consider that. That being said, if you're here and you're watching, once again, I invite you to put something in the chat that describes what you would say is your current relationship with your inner fire. For example, you might write, my fire is wild, or it's shut down, or I feel nervous about it, or I really trust it, or I don't trust it, or I love it. So if you're here and you want to share something about your relationship with your inner fire currently, please feel free to share that. And then in your own self-reflection, again, I invite you to consider what might it be for maybe that isn't fully getting used right now. I want to talk about what I tend to see when I work with women in leadership. You may not exactly fit in any of these boxes, but I want to share a couple of examples of what can happen with our fire as a result of, you fill in the blank, as a result of your workplace culture, as a result of the kinds of industries you've worked in, as a result of the patriarchy, as a result of whatever might be the reasons you have for why you may feel like you're not sure how to wield your fire well at work. One thing that I tend to see is that many women have shut it down. I also think this is why the blog at this moment in time that I sent out recently caught so much attention, because I think there are a lot of us that are sitting there going, there's just something more in me. Either, again, something I assess as positive or not so positive, but there's something more in me. And I want to do something with it, or there's some way that it might actually be uncontainable, or I don't want to contain it anymore. Many of us have shut it down, learned it wasn't okay, either at home or at work. What might that have looked like? For example, you may have grown up in a household where actually there was a lot of fire, a lot of energy, a lot going on. Maybe there was a lot of anger or aggression in the kind of home that you grew up in. Perhaps not. Maybe it was like nobody ever made a sound or nobody ever showed their emotions. Could be either side of the coin. And in some way, your body mind system went, I think I better not. Somehow it's probably safer. Somehow it may not be the best idea because there's so much going on that, I don't want what's going to come back at me if I let that out of the bag, or because there's nothing going on and it would be really weird, or I would be criticized, or whatever, fill in the blank. I go all the way back to early life because I think, especially with things like our emotions and these deeper aspects of ourself that get, that might be a little bit more pre-verbal or more visceral. Often the imprint of what we've decided to do with it and why does actually happen before we enter the workplace. However, it could be that also you rolled through your whole childhood and your whole education and you found yourself in the workplace, and it was only suddenly then actually that you learned, it can't be or it doesn't go here. Definitely, as we're earlier in our careers, younger in our careers, there's often a certain way. We look up, we look around us, we go, here's a certain way I'm supposed to be. And I think, if we take stock of corporate America or corporate, across the globe at this point in time, or even in the nonprofit sector in many cases, or government, it's like we sit still, we contain ourselves, we open our mouths when it's the right time to do so. And emotions, they're kind of questionable, or anything that might fit in that. And in particular, passion, in particular, anger, in particular, something that's a bigger emotion can look or feel kind of out of place. We may have even not been able to contain our fire, our emotion, our expression in some way, and then had the experience of getting quote unquote in trouble for it in some way. Maybe it actually lost me a job. Maybe it didn't get me a promotion. Maybe in some way I got critiqued or criticized, again, at home or at work. So this is fairly endemic, I think, when it comes to navigating the experience of coaching and supporting women in leadership. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the problem is you can't selectively numb, meaning whatever mechanism you use in your body mind system to turn down your fire, to contain, to control, to be careful, all of these things, it applies to everything because it's the same physiology that does it. So if I do that to my fire, probably my joy is going along with it. Probably my capacity to feel excited or alive or even interested, or again, fill in the blank with what's true for you, is going down with it, because we're actually practicing what we would call in somatics containment, turning it down, holding it in, putting it in a box, tucking it away, these kinds of things that we do in our physiology that actually change our relationship with our emotional tenor or our access to things. If you practice that long enough, it might be that you just look or feel numb. It might be that you actually kind of lose access to finding it again. Or maybe, again, you're on the other side of the spectrum where it's so big for you that actually, in some way, it's not really containable, but you hold, and then at some point you explode. So I'll give you a couple of examples about myself from my early career. I would say in my early career in particular, I had a lot of fire, but had learned from different moments earlier in my life as well that it wasn't totally welcome in the workplace. What would happen was that I would hold in, I would feel a lot, I would hold in a lot, I would get either excited and or angry about things. For sure, anger was part of that range of spectrum for me. And at work, because of what was appropriate or not appropriate, most of the time it would actually sort of simmer under the surface, and it would come out as either an edge, a certain level of judgment. I wouldn't really think, I thought I was doing a good job of keeping it in, but it might come out and it would prick somebody, or it would poke somebody, or it would hurt somebody, because it had a lot of that kind of judgment tonality to it. For sure, me against you was a part of the way that that would run for me. In terms of passion and excitement, that was a little easier for me actually to access, like getting excited or showing that part of myself in my earlier career. What would happen that was interesting, though, was that on the home front, I could rage. And most people don't actually know that about me, unless you've worked more deeply with me. But, where I would kind of keep it together at work, or I'd sort of be seen as like contained and a little judgmental or having an edge, I would fly off the handle in my personal relationships. And I think some of that was that there was such a level of holding and holding and holding in, that something that maybe was not that big of a deal or was kind of unrelated to whatever else was happening that was pushing my buttons, or that I was running a certain amount of that kind of fire about, it would just come out in a place where I felt safe. And that would look like physically yelling, in some cases, actually like physical, like I might throw something against a wall, for example. That level of fire was in this little body. And sometimes I'd be like, wow, like really this little, I'm 5.5, or I'm 5'2". So I'm a fairly small human, for those who don't know me. But it would just suddenly come out of nowhere. And I'm like, wow, that's terrifying. So then of course I would want to contain it more and hold on to it more and be more careful. And over time, that really added up to a lot of challenges and self-expression when I was feeling a lot. And then over time, that added up to trying less often, or just like taking myself out of the game more often, becoming more numb over time, because I just didn't know if it showed up that I would be able to handle it or what would happen. I didn't really think that would happen in the workplace, and it never really did. But it's like then I start to have this relationship where it's totally, scary and not really sure what's going to happen if it shows up. So, this is one example. Another way that we might relate to having too much fire could be I'm just really passionate. I really care about what I do. I love what I'm up to. And then I love it so much and I'm doing it so much and I'm so passionate about it and I'm so excited about it that there's no down cycle that ever happens and I'm burning myself out. Actually worked in a workplace that was kind of like this when I started my career, and at consulting context, everybody loved their job. People were super passionate. There was a lot of fire, if you will, for what we were up to as an organization, and our client work and our consulting work. And what that amounted to was a culture where people weren't taking breaks and everybody was working all the time, and one thing after another. And there was like we were like riding the high of our passion, our fire, our excitement, our love of what we were doing constantly over time. What's interesting about our fire in this particular way is that neurochemically, it can be like an addiction, right? I'm running it, I like it, it feels good, it keeps me excited, I want more of it. And then, by the way, when I start to come down, I'm bored, or I'm like, is anything happening? Or I'm not sure. So there's both a hit for staying on it, and then there's also potentially a confusion, a feeling less useful, or something like that that can go with the other side of the coin when I start to, if there's ever a moment where I let myself down cycle. So I almost can't unplug from that kind of fire. Fire consumes, fire takes, fire reproduces itself. If you think about the actual element fire, it wants to keep making more of itself, and it does, and it does, and it does. And so while we would say, well, I want to be a person who's passionate at work, if you know that territory, if you know that that's part of your, in a way, Achilles heel, or that's part of your shadow, you know that sometimes it's easy to then get consumed, or it can become a little bit more like an addiction. So having these types of relationships with fire, first of all, is fairly normal in our current context and the type of workplaces we're in. One, as I already mentioned, it's not like we have most workplaces, most company cultures, most industries, great training grounds for what do you do if you have a lot of fire, feelings, anger, emotions, blah, blah, blah. What do? There's not a lot of like, here's how you use it well. Here's a great example of that. Let's actually practice it together as a team, for example. Not so much. If you're in that kind of workplace, you're super lucky, and I'd love to talk to you more about what that's like. Or on the other hand, right, you might be in the type of workplace I described where people are running a lot of energy, fire, passion, especially I see this in the nonprofit sector, especially right now, or in movement work, where it's like that and then that and then that. And we don't necessarily have a lot of great practices to unplug from it, to downcycle from it. We might even wear it like a badge of honor. In either case, there are certainly costs. There are benefits. We can say more about that also, but there are certainly costs, right? If we're talking about the kind of containing, shutting it down, holding it in, we might, again, lose access to the other side of the coin of fire, our passion, our joy, etc. We can physically make ourselves sick. Also, you may have had this experience. If I'm holding it in, at some point, I'm starting to make myself sick. Or you're finding, wow, actually, I'm kind of numbing out. I'm shutting down. I just don't feel much anymore. There can also be a cost for others, certainly, if I'm holding it in, then flying off the handle, or if I'm being really calm and a little numb and shut down. And then, of course, the other person on the other side is getting not the real me. Our relationships can end up suffering when we don't have a really balanced or right relationship with our own fire. Because in some way, I'm not actually being me, or I'm being this way, and then suddenly this other side comes out, for example, which unfortunately often for women in the workplace comes back to your reputation. Now, I'm known for this. I'm known for being kind of checked out and shut down, or I'm known for being the person who flies off the handle, or the angry girl, or whatever I get seen as, which then may lead to certain opportunities not being extended to us or missed, which then may lead us to go, see, I told you, I got to tone it down even more. It almost can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, or kind of a negative versus a virtuous cycle, like a vicious cycle, where it actually ties itself up even more tightly. Same on the other side, by the way. If you're running too much fire, a lot of passion, kind of in the addiction of it, not able to put it down, we get rewarded in certain ways for that. Then it's like, well, I'll only have that if I get rewarded, or I'll only get rewarded if I have that. I'm not thinking that consciously, but some part of me is like, I get the hit when I'm in it. And if I, let it go, so it becomes a reputation and it becomes a habit. And then we get rewarded for that reputation. Then we get invited to be in situations, promotions, roles, organizations where that's how things are done. And that's actually the culture, or that's actually what's required because it's understaffed or because fill in the blank. Okay, so all of this can be the challenge of working with fire. Why would we want to do it? I would say ask yourself this question. What's getting missed in not having a right relationship with, or for some reason I want to say a masterful relationship, but like what could be possible? Let's say if you're on the too much passion side, what could be possible if you had a more centered and masterful relationship with that part of yourself? What might that look or feel like? What would that open in terms of doors? On the side of letting yourself out of the box more, or like being able to work with it and wield it if you're holding it in a lot, what could be possible? What might you have more access to if that wasn't so tightly held or wasn't running in the way that it's running? I tend to see that purpose has a lot of connection to this. That on either side of the coin, one thing is when I have a stronger relationship with my inner fire, I'm more able to true to purpose, to make choices that actually light me up, turn me on, to know that that's happening and to want to follow them. And also, I'm more able to choose away from, or perhaps recalibrate things that are just taking and kind of the fire to run the fire, and actually get myself into stuff that I care about more. So I think in some ways for me, our fire really is a compass that can open pretty major next level doors to being able to be a full contribution at work. And certainly if we're talking about leadership, to be able to be inspiring, to be able to bring a kind of executive presence that people can feel something from, and really want to go with. So leadership, motivation, passion, purpose, these are all in many ways also the domain of fire. So if those are things you're interested in, or you see a next level for yourself there, even if you're not sure if fire is a place to look, it might be. And hopefully what I've shared today can offer some ideas of how to explore it or how to work with it. Ultimately, sometimes people will ask me, well, how do I strike a balance? And what I believe is that actually a middle ground isn't what you're looking for. That rather, there may be some kind of third type of presence that's neither the over-containing nor the letting it explode. That's neither the running it too much nor the running away from it, right? That there's something else that is your unique version of how to express, how to run, how to leverage fire that is right for you. And I believe that being able to discern, paying attention to, learning more through your own self-observation, reflection, how your relationship with it works, that is where the doorway is to actually be able to change something about it. That's partly why I asked the question at the beginning. No one put anything in the chat here at this moment, but if you're watching later, go ahead and do that. Answer that question, like, what is your current relationship with fire? And then perhaps explore over the next week, what does that actually look like? So I'm going to give you a couple of exploration and reflection questions in the practice for this week, as I like to do. The first question is your fire under or overactive? So taking examples from what I shared a moment ago and or however else you relate to it, would you say intuitively your fire is underactive, contained, shut down, squelched, or overactive? Maybe in what way? You could add that if you're journaling or taking a note or just noting for yourself. And then the next question, how do you know? Especially, how do you literally feel or experience that in your body? How do you know it's under or overactive? How do you know somatically? How do you know in your sensation? How do you know in what's happening in your body, or the things or the ways you do or don't do things? Okay. And then the next question would be, how, if it's underactive, how do you contain it? So I talked about myself keeping narrow, holding in, not saying certain things, quote unquote, biting my tongue. How do you contain it? And how could you ease up on that containing? What would it look like to let it out a little bit more? Kim says, can it be both? Yes, it definitely can. It might be like in this situation, I over contain, in this situation, I under contain. Absolutely. Had a little bit of that for myself. But how? So this question, so sometimes we'll ask the question, why a bunch? Like, why do I do that? Why do I do that? Useful, depending upon what context you're in. But the question, how, is really a body question. What am I doing? Physiologic. Am I holding my breath? Am I getting narrow? Am I opening and being expansive? How do I contain it? Could be behaviorally as well. Last question, if it's over, if your fire is overactive, how do you run it? How do you run it? What does it look like? Oh, I talk too much. I talk really fast. I never stop to take a breath. Fill in the blank, right? Have a little bit of that in me as well, especially when I'm excited. And then the question would be, how could I channel it differently? I won't say better, but differently, with more intention, in a way that is more measured or lands better. How could I channel it? How could I work with funneling it? Sometimes fire in the form of anger, frustration, this kind of fire can become a really strong capacity to be clear and direct in a way that moves an entire organization forward, if you learn how to channel it, right? And so how do you run it now by default? And how could you learn to channel it differently? I'm actually going to put these, we do have a few folks here live. Let's see if I can put these in the chat for us. Oops. There you go. Also, I've just put the masterclass in there again. So these are the questions that I just asked in case you're watching later and you actually want to answer them for yourself or capture them for later. Your homework, if you came to this session, is to be in self-observation for the next 1 or 2 weeks, meaning track this in yourself. Pay attention to your fire. How does it work? When do you feel it? When do you know you're not letting yourself feel it, etc., etc.? Not even trying to change anything at first, but just really letting yourself explore. This is the beginning of the type of work we do in Guts and Grace, our year-long leadership and mastermind program. We do this type of work in Activate, our 8-week course. It is really designed to help you begin the journey of unpacking, unraveling, exploring where there might be leverage or where you could open a door to something more in your leadership, but also in your life, right? If we're talking about the body, this might apply in many different domains. To Kim's question here, maybe you have different ways of being in different domains. That being said, if you would like to go deeper on this hot topic, I really invite you to book a discovery call, because this is actually a really interesting part of how I can support folks. I would say I'm fairly good at identifying pretty quickly, oh, here's what needs to get let go of, here's what needs to get opened, here's a potential way you could experiment with or observe differently or practice something differently around this part of you that is over or underactive right now. So our discovery calls are about 30 minutes. They are designed to help you get clear about what you might need to do next to open a door in your career, in your leadership, or in your contribution. As I mentioned, we really help leaders become more resilient and also more recognized in their industries. So I invite you to have a conversation with me or one of my team if you're like, okay, I get all of this, but like specifically, how does it apply to me? And at the moment of this recording, we actually have the doors open for our Guts and Grace women's leadership coaching and training program, in which we go very deep into these types of things. So discovery call can be just to get a little bit of, coaching and kind of get a few ideas about what next steps to take, but can also be an opportunity to learn more about what we do here at Guts and Grace. As I mentioned before, we also have a masterclass. If you want to go deeper in that way, you're welcome to check that out. Or we also have a quiz called the 4 Keys quiz that I think is in the show notes for this as well. So a few different things that are available to you. Given the excitement and depth of this topic, I'm not going to have time to do a practice, like a guided practice with you today, but I do want to say thank you for coming. And What I would encourage, as I already mentioned, is really to observe yourself and just get to know it a little bit more. I may do another live session or another blog perhaps on this topic. Get to know it a little bit more. Let yourself be in a self-reflection about it. Answer some of the questions that I offered. And to close us, I want to do two things. One, share a quote, which is from an author by the name of Donna Markova from a book that is fairly old, but the poem that she opens with is really stunning. And one of the lines goes like this. She says, "I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I will loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise." Dot, dot, dot. So I invite you, as you consider, do you want to keep working with your relationship with fire, to be in this question, like what might it be to not die an unlived life, or to not live in fear of catching fire, letting something ignite you? And then what do you need to practice and learn about yourself to be able to do that in a healthy and centered and life-giving, relationship-serving kind of way? Okay, I want to affirm that everything and anything you may have learned, realized, integrated, or practiced in this session serves the good in your life, in your leadership, and on your team, and that you will remember what you need to remember, and that any practice you choose to engage in from this moment forward bears some fruit. I wish you a great rest of your day, and I hope I'll see you back here